The kicker battle is over as the roster turns over and the Vikings scramble to find a corner. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day, each and every day. Thank you so much for hanging out all summer. And if you are new, hello and welcome. You have come to the right place for training camp thoughts, updates, etc. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. There's something for everyone all day, every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today's episode is Twitter Tuesday, so thank you so much for submitting questions. You can submit them anytime with the Google form in the show notes or by sending an email to lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com, and I usually put out a call on Twitter on Mondays. So we can get started. First one I am answering is from Hjort, who asks, are we sad about John Parker Romo leaving? So here's the news. John Parker Romo tweeted about an hour before the Vikings confirmed that he was going to get waived, and that Bobby McCain, who was most recently with the Giants, sort of a backup slot corner, and played a bunch of free safety on Flores' Dolphins teams, is now here. He's 31. He's been around the league for a while and comes in to sort of help bolster that depth. But John Parker Romo waived. That means Will Reichard has won the kicker battle. So to answer the question, are we sad about John Parker Romo leaving? Here's my deal. I liked the fact that they signed him because I just like the idea of competition with a kicker that, especially like the spring leagues for kickers for me is big because it's professional experience off of professional dimensions and hash marks and stuff. It's somebody with, who's out of college. It's somebody that won't cost you anything. So I think it's a good place to try to find a kicker. Like I think what the Lions did with that Bates guy, he's so good in the spring leagues and stuff, bodes fairly well for them. And Michael Badgley's hurt, by the way. So that, I like that. They drafted a kicker. I've already made my thoughts clear on the use of resources and the cost. However, what I've learned about kicking in the meantime, just comparing the two and forgetting about cost, Reichard fixes to be more consistent to me. His mechanics are more consistent, and there are fewer problems than what I saw with what I could look at with John Parker Romo. So this makes a lot of sense. Are we sad? No, I think this was going to happen sometime anyways. The fact that it happened before pads even came on, one kicking competition in shells, not even in full pads, and John Parker Romo misses one and it's over. Reichard makes 5 out of 5, no drama. It tells me that this wasn't really a competition. It was, he's in the building. Let's make sure Reichard doesn't fall apart. He didn't fall apart. Okay, it's Reichard, which also answers the next question, which comes from Ryan, who asks, do the Vikings add another kicker for camp, or is it officially just Will Reichard's season? The only way I see that happening is an injury, obviously, or a total catastrophe, just a total meltdown in a preseason game or something like that. Then maybe they say, we got to go push him now. But no, it's Will Reichard season. They have made that decision. Brian asks, is there any money the Vikings would have to eat in order to cut Scene? So this was the other thing, and some people asked about with the Bobby McCain news, does this mean the end for Scene, blah, blah, blah. So Bobby McCain doesn't play outside corner, even though Flores said maybe they'll try him at slot corner or outside corner, but he's going to start out at safety. In Flores' defenses in the past, he has played free safety. When he was with the Commanders and the Giants, they moved him to slot corner. Maybe they just had a need or something. But with Flores, he's played free safety. And it sounds like that's what they're going to do. But hey, you've got this other experience. Maybe we'll play with that later. So that puts him in the safety room. Does that push Scene out? I think with the hits that DB depth have taken over the last week, I don't know if anything is a guarantee. But right now, Scene is also hurt. So that's hurting his case way more than whatever transactions happen on the bottom of the roster. He's got to get back in. Right now, I think Scene actively needs to do something to prove his roster spot. And I mean, you can't make the club in the tub, right? So to answer the question, though, that Brian asks, is there money the Vikings have to eat? The answer is yes, and it is a very prohibitive yes. If they just cut him outright, so right now, Lewis Scene costs about $3 million on the cap. If they cut him outright, he would cost $5 million on the cap, And there would continue to be dead money next year too. It's not like they're just getting the whole debt out of the way. So yes, cutting him would be a really costly thing. Now, trading him totally solves this problem. So you might see like a Jalen Reagor style, somebody had a high draft grade on him and wants to see if they can get him as a reclamation project kind of thing, cut down day trade kind of deal. And to be honest, I think that actually might be what I predict happens here. I right now, I don't see Lewis Cena on the 53-man roster until he gets healthy, gets in a preseason game and shows something. And all those things are big ifs, and you kind of got to parlay all of them. But yeah, the money is an issue for cutting him, not so much of an issue for trading him. All that guaranteed salary travels to the new team, and you save like $1 million. You don't save a lot because you still have a bunch of prorated signing bonus that hits you in the face, but not a bunch. But you say it's all small. It's a rookie contract. Run Game Enjoyer asks, with the Bradbury's Tribune article mentioning O'Connell urging the offense to play with more physicality and power, something McVay recently has said caused his shift in run game schemes last year for the upcoming season. Do we think that's more proof that the Vikings are actually looking to become more of a gap and power team with Brandel, Ingram, and a heavier Bradbury on the interior? That's a good theory. It's hard to know, and this is going to be something that the Vikings keep very, very close to the vest, so we won't know until it's actually happening, but that seems like as good a guess as any as to what will happen. And like, it makes a lot of sense too, because McVay is Kevin O'Connell's mentor. So if McVay goes that way, and they had some success with that, and the Vikings haven't had any success with their run game in O'Connell's 2 years here, a wholesale change like that does make a lot of sense to try. I like gap scheme better than zone. That's something that I've grown to enjoy as a personal preference. A lot of people will vehemently disagree with me on that. Not trying to start a war, but I like gap. I think counter rocks. Man up, run counter. And the bigger the down blocking. The thing about it is pulling, and this could also explain. So Reisner had some struggles as a puller last year, where he would take it a little bit too wide, and then he would get spilled, which means the edge would get inside of him, get inside his gap, and then it would bounce the run outside where it doesn't want to be. That happened to him a couple of times, and that might be the kind of thing that makes you, and like Brandel was more consistent there. So as the guard, you do a lot of pulling. So like that's an important part of the job. And that's kind of the part of the job where you have the highest leverage. The thing about gap, everybody's down blocking except for the puller, and the down blockers have a much easier job than they do on zone blocks where they have to reach and they have to get up to, they have to like climb up to linebackers that are usually starting ahead of them, and they have to like gain ground laterally. That's really hard for the big guys. Down blocking, you don't have to gain any ground laterally. So it's like easier for everybody and a lot harder for one guy. And that's kind of the trade-off that you take. So the one guy it gets a lot harder for, that job's really important. So I could see that explaining a lot of stuff. I like that theory. We'll see what happens. But it makes sense to me, just like passes the smell test. And then Nolan M asks, is Blake Brandel actually 6'7"? That has to make him the tallest guard in the league, right? We have to take the Vikings on faith. I mean, I can't exactly walk up to him with a tape measure, but I could, I guess, but that would be weird, and I'd probably get kicked out of wherever I'm at. So this was hard to find information on the like actual total heights, other than like trying to like scrape websites or something. I don't know. I couldn't find somebody that was somewhere that was just like listing it by that, but it seems like he is at the very least tied for, if not the tallest current guard in the league. And you get into a little trouble because there's a lot of tackles that are 6'8". There's a lot of tight ends that are 6'8", and a lot of defensive players, mostly edges, that are 6'8", 6'9". So on the outside, there's lots and lots of tackles, and Brandel is 6'7", is plenty tall for a tackle, but he's not one of the tallest players in the league. So kicking him inside to guard, on the interior, you don't want as much height. Low man wins, and it's harder for taller people to get low, which is why big giant it's why Bryant McKinney never moved into guard, right? Too much of a mountain man, and everybody could get under him, and leverage is a lot more important there. Whereas tackle, reach, and wingspan are more important because it's a bigger space and it's a different kind of game of judo, So kicking him inside and being tall might not work in his favor. Obviously, that's a trade-off that they've taken to have the best player inside, best puller, or whatever he does. And he's done that like in the past and been fine, right? But he is a tackle that has moved inside for a couple of years now. And I couldn't find anybody else at guard that's 6'7". The only thing you could count is maybe Daniel Fa'alele, who played one guard snap, and he's 6'8". So if we're talking about like record holders, but Mike Harris also a few years ago, if we're talking historically, Mike Harris in Minnesota played guard in, I think it was 2015. He was a tackle that moved inside and was I think he was 6'8", and he overcame it, but it like doesn't work for that reason for a lot of guards that try to kick inside. Got a bunch more questions, so hang on tight. We're going to go rapid fire pretty soon here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, there is a new boost or bonus every single day on FanDuel. So whether you are trying to gamble on a baseball game, on an NFL future, on the Olympics, whatever it is, say you think the Vikings will finish third in the division instead of last, which is where they're slated to go, you actually bet on that at FanDuel. So go to FanDuel.com and check back every single day because they have a new boost or bonus of some sort every single day for everyone. All customers, all the time. Once again, that is FanDuel.com. Make every moment more. Next question comes from Purple Nurple, who asks, do you think that the Vikings are locking down training camp videos to tamper JJ McCarthy hype and or people saying he's a bust, or just talk in general? Probably not. Like if you go to the comments on any Vikings video on YouTube or anything on any of their posts on Twitter or Facebook or any social media, you will find the whole gamut of opinions. You will find positive, you'll find negative, you'll find delusional homers, delusional haters, you'll find everything. So I don't know if there's really any point to the Vikings trying to tamp down like one opinion or the other, and I don't think that that's something that they truly care about. I think they care about PR when it comes to controversial things and things that people would like boycott them over or something like that, but not on-field stuff necessarily. My understanding is with the training camp videos, they're really worried about revealing information possibly to opponents because somebody, filmed a play that they did and posted it. Essentially giving everybody a free Spygate, right? Like that's the thing that they're worried about. For me though, I think that's a little overly paranoid. Most of what they do at training camp, they're probably going to do in the preseason, which everybody gets the film on. And, for little bits that they aren't, they're still working base concepts in training camp. You don't do the fancy stuff in training camp very much. Even Flores, who's doing blitzes and all kinds of fancy stuff all the time, well, he lives in that. He's going to do that in the preseason as well. That's like just what he does. So I don't think that there's a lot that you can reveal in camp that like wouldn't already be apparent. And I think it really does suck that people who don't live in the Eagan area, like if you live in northern Minnesota or if you live, it's a 2-hour drive, it's not worth it. Like you just don't really get to know what's going on at camp, except for like the beat writers that are tweeting, completion stats at you. That's kind of all you get. And I think that really sucks. And like the hyper curated videos that it's like, it's very controlled. So where I'm at, I don't think you're doing a lot of damage to the team, but they don't want you to do it. So that's the rules, like whatever, it is what it is. But I don't think it has anything to do with like controlling narratives. I don't think the Vikings care. Sam Olson asks, what are you looking for out of JJ and Dallas Turner in the preseason, form-wise, play-wise, and just overall? So Sam, if you missed Mondays and Fridays episodes, you'll get a lot of that. They're basically entirely dedicated to that answer to JJ McCarthy in terms of the mechanics I'm looking for. I'm focusing more on the mechanics. I'm just choosing to because it's the conversation I find most interesting. And it's the thing that I know he's working on, right? It's the thing that they're changing. The way that he reads and the way that he manages the pocket and stuff, that all kind of came out ready to go out of the box, which is a lot of the reason I like the pick. But the mechanics are being changed and the process of learning that I think is really fun to follow. So that we're going into that in a lot of detail, but what you're looking for right now, like that is not supposed to be done yet. And it's not, but what you're looking for right now is, relaying the play calls properly, doing line calls. There was one of the training camp videos where they did an Oscar call. And this is the thing, like Oscar is a term that maybe a third of the league uses to mean flip the play. And when it comes to actual games, they'll change the word. They'll have probably a different word for every single game, right? They'll say Shakira, and that means go right, because it's got an R in it. and But for now, they're saying Oscar. But just knowing that he saw the key, he did the Oscar call. Was that correct to do? We don't get to know, but the coaches do. That's the kind of stuff you want to be like pretty tight by now. But mechanically, we can be a lot more patient about that. And then with Dallas Turner, somebody actually asked this question about Dallas Turner. Cam Ekstrom, in the same vein as your analysis of JJ McCarthy, is there anything similar that we can look for from Dallas Turner that will help us get an idea of his early impact? So pads are on. I think they're practicing as I'm recording this, so stay tuned. But pads are on now, so that will give us a sense. So watch him in the O-line, D-line one-on-ones. What are the moves he uses? And you're looking for quickness and stuff, but it depends on what move he uses. Then there's criteria for what makes a good rip, right? How low to the ground is he getting? How is he setting it up? Is he using a jab step or not? That kind of stuff. And all of that is stylistic, but once you've answered that and you've kind of categorized what he's trying to do, then you can decide, okay, if he does use a jab step, is he being dramatic enough with that jab step to really bait the tackle, or is it just kind of a rhythm step that's just wasting time? Those kinds of things. Probably a whole episode probably a Patreon worth dedicating to that too, if he plays enough in the preseason to get a good sample. But the way he's playing and everybody's so excited about him, he might not actually play that much in the preseason, which would be very good news. JJ McOrathy, I love that, asks, do you think JJ will play all of preseason? No, you'll get some Nick Mullins in there, maybe even a little Jaren Hall, probably no Sam Darnold. And unless JJ McCarthy wins the first team job before the preseason, which would be a pretty extreme result, then you'd probably have Sam Darnold playing and you'd say, okay, McCarthy, you're ready. You don't need any preseason, but they're probably going to give him a lot of preseason, maybe just not all. I would anticipate now that he's playing with the second team, if he remains with the second team, up until that preseason game, I would expect him to start preseason games and probably play for a lot of them. But yeah, we'll see that, but I think you'll see plenty. Jack Callahan asks, do you think the rumored 3-game suspension for Addison would be an appropriate punishment? Appropriate is a tough word. Here's the deal. It's what you get for DUIs. It's what everybody else got for DUIs. And my thing with this is I don't think the NFL should have to be the moral compass. Like, we shouldn't have to ask that question and say, well, what's the appropriate punishment for the appropriate punishment for a DUI is being booked by the state of California and paying the fine and serving, your probation sentence or whatever they end up going with. Like, that is what the appropriate punishment for a DUI should be. Like, his employer shouldn't have to also take up the mantle of doing something moral because we're not satisfied enough with the punitive justice system. That's just me. I don't know. I just don't think that we should look to the NFL to do that. And plus, it would be illegal, but like what you're really docking Addison is the pay, the game check, and yeah, the privilege to play NFL games, which he all wants to do. But really, it's that he loses the game checks, which is tens, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's the real punishment there. But to do that, you also have to punish the Vikings, who didn't do anything wrong. They didn't DUI, right? Well, the OC did, but that's a different thing. So yeah, the 3-game suspension, it is the rules. It is what it is. I have a really hard time having a strong moral opinion about what an appropriate punishment should be for something that is a crime. And we have a whole system for that in the United States. Bunch more questions here. Oh my goodness gracious. I have so many more. So we're going to try to get through them all, but they're all good. So I do want to. That'll come up next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Gametime. It is the best ticketing app on the market. Best place to find last-minute tickets. So whether you are trying to maybe spontaneously get to a Twins game, go check out their flash deals where you can find insane savings. They're like big letters on the top of the app. Or if you're just trying to get last minute, you can save up to 60% buying last minute for all kinds of events, including sporting, but also comedy, theater, concerts, you name it. Or you can even, all the NFL games are up now. You can get whatever Vikings tickets that you want or elsewhere, wherever you live. London game, home opener versus San Francisco, home games against division opponents, whatever you want. The Kirk Cousins return, if you want that, against Atlanta. You can find all of that at Gametime, and you can find excellent deals there all the time. So check back often. It changes quite a bit. keep an eye on it, and you're going to find a good deal. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Moving on with this Twitter Tuesday episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast. Next one comes from Jack, who asks, if you could watch 10 1v1 reps of one offensive player versus one defensive player in camp, who would they be? My answer is Duke Shelley versus Brandon Powell. That's a good one, because both of those players are kind of interesting and fun to watch. Like, Brandon Powell is fun to watch in camp for sure. He was a blast last time. He was killing it in camp. Somebody asked, how's Brandon Powell doing? I have not heard one thing or the other. I'm going off the same reports you are, though. Again, we'll pencil all this out. A lot of people ask, like, how does so-and-so look? What about this guy? Put a pin in that, all right? We'll talk to somebody later in the week who's there. But for me, my answer is probably Dallas Turner and Christian Darrisaw. Just for one, iron sharpen iron, good matchup to watch, but I do want to see what Darrisaw's been talking about. He had that quote about how, like, the spin move that he put on, and everybody's like raving about Dallas Turner. I want to see him go up against the best, or Brian O'Neill, as it were, because it'll probably be Gernard versus Darrisaw. But, like, give me those O-line, D-line one-on-ones. I'll take any of them, to be honest. Gary Melbreck asks, will Jordan Love's contract cripple the Packers' future? So longtime everydayers will know how I feel about such matters. But my answer is not going to be satisfying to those of you who want the Packers to fall apart and die now that they have an expensive quarterback. Here's the deal. So the Packers, cap space wise, are very crunched for the next 3 years. They are spent down to like 20 mil all the way through 2026. They've got like 22 mils left this year. As that rolls over, it gives them a projected 16 mil next year. So the rollover is helping them stay under next year, if I understand it correctly. And then even in 2026, they have like large chunks of money. Jordan Love's real money starts to kick in, and then they're going to kind of be in that cap space forever. So there's a few caveats to that. They are a little shorter on space than you want to be this far ahead of time. But they're still fine, and everything is super restructurable. They haven't gone through any of the restructures, any of the signing bonus, any of the void year stuff. They could go through a lot of those paces, and they can do it for a long time before it starts to really hurt them. So they can keep this band together for as long as they want. And that's really the deal with the Packers right now. The Packers have like 7 or 8 key players under contract for the foreseeable future, and here's their core, right? They have whatever you get left out of Kenny Clark. That's like their biggest contract, which, by the way, it's not going to be paid the way that it's projected to be paid, so that's going to bring their cap space up too. But, Jair Alexander, Elton Jenkins, Rashawn Gary, Xavier McKinney, Josh Jacobs is even on a 3-year deal. And then, of course, Jordan Love, and then all of these wide receivers on rookie contracts. That's their core. And they don't have a lot of needs coming up, and they won't have a lot of money, but they won't need to do a lot with that money. They'll just kind of have that core. So the question about the Packers is, does this core win Super Bowls? If so, then they're made in the shade, right? If they're good enough to be true contenders, they're made in the shade, and they just have to keep it all together. When they have to start paying those receivers, that might become a little bit tough, but like, who are they paying? Eric Stokes? He's probably the next guy on the docket for them. And then you got the 2022 receivers. You got Christian Watson. I don't know if he gets a second contract with them. Romeo Doubs, I think, does. They're like, then you kind of start having to pay those guys or replace them and stuff. The next couple of drafts will be very important to their ability to transition away from older players like Alexander and Kenny Clark, and into the kind of next generation. And that will be the thing that determines if the Jordan Love Packers, and by the way, the commitment to Jordan Love is very real. He's got guarantees that kick in. He will be the Packers quarterback for the next 5, 6, 7 years. But by year 5, 6, 7, it's going to be a totally different group of people. And the next few drafts for the Packers will determine if that group is good, or if it's, Jordan Love trying to pull everything together and make up for all these guys that don't really play well. So that's my deal with it. But the actual money conversation, there's so many different buttons they can press. They'll be fine, but they are going to have to win with the core that they have now, which is the choice that they made. There's not going to be a lot of room for flexibility and for pivoting if something doesn't turn out the way that they thought. But the plan that they have put together is very clear, and very much ready to be. It is sustained. It's not sustainable. It is sustained. They're going to just have these guys for now 3-4 years. These are the Packers for the foreseeable future. The casual NFL fan asks, how would you configure the D-line personnel for its base fronts, four-man fronts, and in neutral situations and on passing situations? So here's the way that Flores does this. So this guy's a Raiders fan, so of course he doesn't know. The base front is going to be Grenard, and then I'm going to guess a Van Ginkel-Turner rotation of some kind. Right now it's just Turner because Van Ginkel's on the pup. And inside you have Harrison Phillips, and I'm going to guess Jonathan Bullard, I believe is the other. I think he's the other D tackle, starting opposite Phillips. So there's your four-man, and then in base, I believe Jerry Tillery is the guy that would come off for four-man fronts, but is in there for base fronts. But that's a big competition. There's Jihad Ward. There's a lot of guys that are in for that kind of I call it the Dean Lowry memorial role. There's a lot of Dean Lowrys all competing for that job, but I think Jerry Tillery is the one in pole position. He's the king of the hill that people are trying to knock off. So in four-man fronts, then you pull that off. Of course, you've got two off-ball linebackers behind him. That'll be Cashman and Ivan Pace. And then on passing situations on third and long, you take the D tackles out and Flores replaces them with edges. So you'll have Van Ginkel, Turner, Grenard all on the field. You might even have Patrick Jones and just go like 4 edge rushers for that. They did that last year. Or maybe like one big nose tackle to push the pocket. That would be like Harrison Phillips, or sometimes Harrison Phillips would come off for those, and that guy would be like Bullard. And then like 3 edge rushers that are all a little quicker, and you try to do some crazy stunt or package with it. Ken Lovin asks, do you think that Naylor having a good camp so far with the twos will help him compete with Powell for the third receiver spot? Yeah, that's kind of the whole idea here, right? I think that he's the one that's closest to knocking off Powell, and if he continues to show out, then yeah, we start to have that conversation. Jackson asks, he's got 2. On the offensive play calls where there are so many instructions being given, have you ever heard of a head coach or QB throwing in some random words to keep opposing teams on their toes? So those play calls, the opposing team doesn't hear them. That's like for the huddle and stuff. But like for Oscar calls, right? If Oscar flips the play, well, everybody in the NFL knows that because their offense probably uses Oscar. So you got to say something else, right? You got to make up a word for it that everybody now knows, and you say Shakira instead. Jackson also asks, when teams with an abundance of players at one position would trade one of their players to a team with an abundance at another to even out both teams, seems mutually beneficial. This is a common economics concept. Could you see a situation where Jay Ward or Theo Jackson gets traded to a team with an abundance at one of the many positions of need for the Vikings? I don't know if you go player for player. I think the trade that solves that roster pressure is you trade Lewis Cine away and you get like a conditional 7th or something. I think... Because like with Jay Ward, who also is a valued special teamer, Theo Jackson, I think they really like it. I think I really want to keep him in, and they want Theo Jackson to have that be part of those 4 safety looks sometimes. And then Lewis, you trade the odd man out. So I think they might Rager trade Lewis Cine, and then your safety room looks pretty normal from there. Andy, not Adam, asks, if you could change the outcome of one play in any Vikings game, what would it be? Can't be a field goal, too easy, and it has to be in your lifetime. In my lifetime... I feel like the Nate Poole 2003 catch would be a memory I would be pretty happy to not have anymore. I could also, the easiest one, and I think you also don't want me to say this because it's too easy, but it's Brett Favre's crossbody interception in the NFC Championship game. If he just runs that thing out of bounds 5 yards forward or kicking a field goal, and we're going to the Super Bowl. Chris asks, what's the highest number of safeties on the field at one time, and what's the likelihood that record gets tied or broken? So, you could have 11 on the field at the same time if you were an idiot. But I think probably 6, because I don't think anybody even rosters more than that. But in terms of DBs, 7 DB packages is like a Belichick tree thing. It's Flores, it's Belichick, it's Joe Judge, Patricia, all those guys will do the 7 DB thing, especially on third downs, and Flores will do that too. Probably 5 safeties, because I think he'll only have 5 active. Will be the most that you see on the field, plus however many corners. Not Your Father's Dopamine asks, name a better commercial than the Nike NFL Leave Nothing Masterpiece. Pro tip, you can't. That's the one with like Sean Merriman making a bunch of tackles and then like back down the field, Steven Jackson breaks a bunch of tackles and they like fight. True, I can't. That thing gets me so hyped up I watched it before I recorded this so that I had the hype to have the energy for a podcast. It rocks. Absolutely. No, I cannot. That'll do it for Twitter Tuesday. I didn't get to all of your questions, so I apologize for that. I actually have some saved for next time, so we'll get to them if we want. But I will see you all tomorrow with camp updates and stuff. And as always, Skull.